I'm here to tell you about how to simplify your ACT practice. One of the great appeals of the ACT model is that you can make it simple. People love simplicity, of course. We love stuff that we can use because you can make the world's most fantastic tools, but they're effectively useless if no one knows how to use them. Acceptance and commitment therapy, it sits on top of a scientific philosophy called functional contextualism. Now, what this means is that pragmatism is at its heart. It's one of its central tenets, which is why so many ACT practitioners and trainers talk about something called workability. So, what is workability? I remember seeing a poll on Twitter some years back that asked psychologists, what do you think is more important, truth or usefulness? And around 2/3 voted for truth. In some ways, these findings don't surprise me because mechanistic assumptions shape many areas of psychology. That people are healthy when their thinking, physiology, biology, emotions, and behavior operate correctly. Naturally, any thoughts would create problems like depression or anxiety. So, through the mechanistic worldview, truth is sacred. However, in ACT, we take a different stance. Functional contextualism is different to mechanism in that it sees all human phenomena as acts in context. Experiences are never seen as abnormal because a person's learning history can always be explained by it. Rather than saying one thing is healthy and another is unhealthy, we pay attention to whether something helps to improve your life. Think of it this way. Does exercise improve your well-being? Well, in many circumstances, the answer is, of course, yes. However, there are also many circumstances too where the answer would be no. For example, a person has an exercise addiction to try and control what others think about their appearance. Similarly, what if your client has a cardiac condition in which it's dangerous for your heart to go over 170 beats per minute? Remember function and context. The question is more complicated than we initially thought. First, we must explore the individual's context to determine the functions of exercise and what type of exercise you mean. Context and function are the two halves of workability. Do this behavior and the way you do it help your well-being in this context here and now? That's the question. And by digging into the consequences of an action within a specific environment, you can more effectively determine whether it helps. Simple? Maybe. That's the idea, of course. However, it's not always easy in practice. For example, when I have a client who talks fast and incessantly, it's easier for me to get lost in the content of what they're talking about. Compared with when someone speaks more slowly, I have a much easier time paying attention to function and context. Here's a simple tool. Do you ever use the ACT matrix? Well, I look for ways sometimes to engage the client in something simple. And one approach I find helpful is to use an ACT matrix. It helps me focus on what they're saying and why they're saying it. An ACT matrix clearly illustrates some essential components of psychological flexibility. For example, who and what do you care about? That's the values piece, isn't it? What small purposeful steps can you take? That's the committed action piece. What feelings do you try to avoid, push away, fix, or control? That's the experiential avoidance piece. And which thoughts hook your attention? The cognitive fusion piece. Which behaviours get evoked from the thoughts and feelings you try to resist? Those are sort of functionally avoidant responses. The two dimensions of noticing, present moment awareness and self as context. In my experience, both practitioners and clients often love the simplicity and usefulness of an ACT matrix. You've probably come across several other tools that consistently prove simple and helpful. Things like the choice point, leaves on a stream, sweet spot exercise. What others have you found beneficial? In ACT, we refer to the tools as the hands of ACT. They're the exercises, techniques, and methods you teach your client. They're tangible rather than elusive, which people can sometimes feel with experiential activities. That makes them attractive, and you can repeatedly turn to the same interventions with different clients. A word to the wise, though, there are costs to simplicity. You can lose sight of essential process qualities which stem from the client's progress. For example, I've noticed that my use of the ACT matrix has prevented something much needed on occasions. If my client is trying to connect with me on a human and a vulnerable level, the ACT matrix can function to put a wedge between us. In one circumstance, I remember noticing that I had a client that wasn't engaged with the exercise and was feeling frustrated. I remember thinking, this isn't working. So I put down the piece of paper and sat with them. I listened and held my client's gaze to connect more deeply with their feelings. Sometimes methods do not simplify the process, they complicate it. What worked here was being still and deepening my empathic connection with the person. Simplicity wears different faces. It won't look the same in every situation. And it'd be best if you used your awareness of the present moment to track the effects of your behaviour. With a compassionate perspective, can you raise your awareness to notice the person who is you and the person they who is sitting opposite? By being willing to experience discomfort, make mistakes and get it wrong, you open yourself up to being flexible. I heard Steve Hayes say once that you only get stuck with a client when you get stuck being inflexible yourself. In other words, if you're firmly wedded to a specific tool or process, then you will inevitably struggle at some juncture. I firmly believe that simplicity goes a long way to helping your client and your development. However, it would help if you were mindful and responsive to the context in which you're moving. There lies both uncertainty and growth. We merely need the courage and awareness, of course, to move our steps in the direction that helps. Take care.